We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the Monday Mashup. It's morning if you're listening in the Pacific region of the United States, and morning if you're listening to this someplace in Asia as well. But it's afternoon here, just barely 2 minutes over the demarcation of morning to afternoon. Certainly on the East Coast, you're well into your day. In any case, I welcome everybody to this edition of Free Association Radio, also known as the Monday Mashup. It is the 3rd of June, and as always, there seems to be a lot happening in the world around us. Today, we're going to focus somewhat on the situation in Turkey. I'll be reading a couple of pieces. One, the latest CNN update, and also a letter from somebody inside Turkey, kind of illustrating and communicating what's taking place there. This letter, by the way, is going viral on the internet, thanks to Facebook and other social media outlets. And we'll get into this letter and what it means potentially for that region. There's a lot happening there now, especially with what's taking place in Syria and Russia sending a number of S-300 missiles, very, very powerful missiles, to the Syrians. Now, they say that those missiles won't get there until the fall, but we don't really know that. And, of course, the Israelis are claiming that the Syrians will then pass the missiles on to Hamas, and then they will be in the hands of the Israelis' most dreaded enemies, even though it's likely Hamas was infiltrated and now co-opted at a very high level. And we won't get into that. That's a whole other story. But there is certainly an ongoing war now taking place in Syria, and one of the big players has been Turkey. Turkey is Syria's neighbor to the north, and they have had a somewhat unsettled peace for quite a while. There was no conflict between the Turks and the Syrians through the regime of the elder Assad and even through the regime of the younger Assad. However, Turkey is one of the most strategic locations in Eurasia and is also a place where the United States has an Air Force base. So the United States is firmly entrenched in the Turkish infrastructure when it comes to being able to refuel planes and actually launch sorties if they need to into the Middle East region. Turkey is also at the nape of Russia. So this is a very strategic point in the geopolitical chessboard of the planet. And right now it is under fire for a number of reasons. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that they certainly appear to have weighed in on the side of NATO and the quote-unquote allies and the Syrian rebels in overthrowing the Assad regime. And a lot of weapons and even troop movements have been launched from Turkey into Syria. So Turkey is aiding and abetting the global push to overthrow the Assad government. And right now, Turkey has a war on two fronts, apparently. It is the NATO-based war, which they are taking part in, but also the war at home. And this war at home was supposedly started by an innocent protest. And let me read you the letter here about why this supposedly took place. This is from a blog by Insanlik Hali, and Insanlik Hali is a Turkish resident, I believe, living in Istanbul. So here's the letter. This was delivered on 6/1, so just 2 days ago. To my friends who live outside of Turkey, I am writing to let you know what is going on in Istanbul for the last 5 days. I personally have to write this because most of the media sources are shut down by the government, and the word of mouth and the internet are the only ways left for us to explain ourselves and call for help and support. 4 days ago, a group of people, most of whom did not belong to any specific organization or ideology, got together in Istanbul's Gezi Park. Among them, there were many of my friends and students. The reason was simple: to prevent and protest the upcoming demolishing of the park for the sake of building yet another shopping mall at the very center of the city. There are numerous shopping malls in Istanbul, at least one in every neighborhood. The tearing down of the trees was supposed to begin early Thursday morning. People went to the park with their blankets, books, and children. They put their tents down and spent the night under the trees. Early in the morning, when the bulldozers started to pull the 100-year-old trees out of the ground, they stood up against them to stop the operation. They did nothing other than standing in front of the machines. No newspaper, no television channel was there to report the protest. It was a complete media blackout. But the police arrived with water cannon vehicles and pepper spray. They chased the crowds out of the park. In the evening, the number of protesters multiplied. So did the number of police forces around the park. Meanwhile, local government of Istanbul shut down all the ways leading up to Taksim Square, where Gezi Park is located. The metro was shut down, ferries were canceled, roads were blocked. Yet more and more people made their way up to the center of the city by walking. They came from all around Istanbul. They came from all different backgrounds, different ideologies, different religions. They all gathered to prevent the demolition of something bigger than the park. The right to live as honorable citizens of this country. They gathered and marched. Police chased them with pepper spray and tear gas and drove their tanks over people who offered the police food in return. 2 young people were run over by the panzers and were killed. Another young woman, a friend of mine, was hit in the head by one of the incoming tear gas canisters. The police were shooting them straight into the crowd. After a 3-hour operation, she is still in intensive care unit and in very critical condition. As I write this, we don't know if she's going to make it. This blog is dedicated to her. These people are my friends. They are my students, my relatives. They have no hidden agenda, and that's within asterisks. As the state likes to say, their agenda is out there. It is very clear. The whole country is being sold to corporations by the government for the construction of malls, luxury condominiums, freeways, dams, and nuclear power plants. The government is looking for and creating, when necessary, any excuse to attack Syria against its people's will. On top of all that, the government control over its people's personal lives has become unbearable as of late. The state, under its conservative agenda, has passed many laws and regulations concerning abortion, cesarean birth, sale and use of alcohol, and even the color of lipstick worn by airline stewardesses. People are marching to the center of Istanbul, demanding their right to live freely and receive justice, protection, and respect from the state. They demand to be involved in the decision-making processes about the city they live in. What they have received instead is excessive force and enormous amounts of tear gas shot straight into their faces. 3 people lost their eyes. Yet they still march. Hundreds of thousands joined them. A couple of more thousand passed the Bosporus Bridge on foot to support the people of Taksim. No newspaper or TV channel was there to report the events. They were busy with broadcasting news about Miss Turkey and the strangest cat of the world. Police kept chasing people and spraying them with pepper spray to an extent that stray dogs and cats were poisoned and died by it. Schools, hospitals, and even 5-star hotels around Taksim Square opened their doors to the injured. Doctors filled the classrooms and hotel rooms to provide first aid. Some police officers refused to spray innocent people with tear gas and quit their jobs. Around the square, they placed jammers to prevent internet connection, and 3G networks were blocked. Residents and businesses in the area provided a free wireless network for the people in the streets. Restaurants offered food and water for free. People in Ankara and Izmir gathered on the streets to support the resistance in Istanbul. Mainstream media kept showing Miss Turkey and the strangest cat of the world. I'm writing this letter so that you know what is going on in Istanbul. Mass media will not tell you any of this, not in my country at least. Please post as many articles as you see on the internet and spread the truth. As I was posting articles that explained what is happening in Istanbul, my Facebook page last night, someone asked me the following question: what are you hoping to gain by complaining about our country to foreigners? This blog is my answer to her. By so-called complaining about my country, I'm hoping to gain freedom of expression and speech, respect for human rights, control over the decisions I make concerning me on my body, the right to legally congregate in any part of the city without being considered a terrorist, but most of all, by spreading the word to you, my friends who live in other parts of the world. I am hoping to get your awareness, support, and help. Please spread the word and share this blog. Thank you. There are 1,600 responses to this blog. The blog is deafness. Okay, this is a strange spelling. It is the blog is defneshumanblogs.com. Deafnesshumanblogs.com. 1,600 responses. It seems to me like alternative media and alternative news is having penetrating impact on this. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I'm not sure what to make of this. I'm not sure what is really going on there. And I'm just being upfront. Part of me wants to say, hey, this is great. Hey, somebody is standing up. People are standing up for their rights. People are standing up for liberty and dignity and respect, because apparently what's taking place there is an oligarchic government just deciding to implement these corporocratic institutions, commercial corporocratic institutions across the board in Turkey, especially in Istanbul, without any real regard or concern for what people want. Now, this is clearly a trend that's happening throughout the world, because what we're seeing here is we're seeing the formation of a global totalitarian state that's based on force and control and surveillance. This is taking place right now. Now, what happens is when we have these experiences or we have these events, there are other things also going on. They are not always just an organic response to too much pressure. Now, that does occur. This does happen. This is, you poke a dog with a stick enough and the dog will snap back. Okay, so this is clearly some kind of response to a local event that has mushroomed. Now, what happens in the aftermath of that, or in the in the days that follow can be a completely different thing. Now, I saw this in the Bay Area where I used to live, and particularly around the death of Oscar Grant. And Oscar Grant, if you don't know who Oscar Grant is, you soon will, because there's a movie opening in June, and it's called Fruitvale Station, and it's about the life and death of Oscar Grant, the young man who was killed by a BART police officer. And it's a terrible incident and extreme and tragic, absolutely tragic. And there was a ton of outrage in Oakland over the needless death of Oscar Grant. And what happened during those protests in Oakland was that there's a really strong socialist community in Oakland. Beyond socialists, we're talking hardcore communist community. This is a group known as the Uhuru House, and there are others as well. And they took advantage of these protests to politicize what was happening and run their agenda. Now, apparently, this is also now taking place in Istanbul, because the socialists now are jumping into the fray, and never let a good disaster or good conflict go to waste, because you can use these things apparently to further agendas and to promote programs in the midst of chaos. So now we have to sort out, where this is going. It's already going somewhere. It's already happened, and people aren't backing down, although apparently it's a little calmer today because it's a work day, but this is clearly looking very much like what took place in Egypt and what happened there with Mubarak and replacing Mubarak with ultimately the Muslim Brotherhood. By the way, if you haven't seen pictures of Cairo and Egypt in the wake of Mubarak's departure and the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood, I wholeheartedly suggest you track them down, because Egypt has turned into a dystopian cesspool of poverty, drugs, orphans, guns, you name it. Cairo has become rapidly one of the most dangerous places in the world to live. This is what the Muslim Brotherhood and so-called liberation has brought the people of Egypt. So this is a very volatile and very fluid situation that's taking place in Turkey. Now, what's interesting about it is that there's a lot happening in Syria, which I've already talked about, and Turkey, being a prime player in that region, now has to deal with a conflict on two fronts. There's the conflict that they are engaged in with NATO and the allies and the quote-unquote freedom fighters of Syria, and then now there's a conflict at home. What history has taught us is that fighting a war on multiple fronts is a recipe for disaster. Now, they could put this down very quickly in Istanbul, but in order to do that, they would have to use more force, more excessive force, at which point they would probably begin to stir up more protesters, and it could become a real issue. Now, that's not to say they couldn't facilitate whatever they're doing with NATO to continue the war on Syria, but their resources in terms of how this is done can be siphoned off, but more importantly, the psychic energy of the country itself will be fractured, and Erdogan as a leader could become far less effective in what he's trying to do, especially as it relates to Syria. So let's go to the CNN version. This is actually from an hour ago, and Ivan Watson and Gul Toysez are the reporters here. I guess I could play the video. You could get some kind of an audio verite. I'm never sure. I didn't play the video yet, so I'm not sure whether or not we're going to get a commercial here. So let me just play this and see what happens. And then I'll read you the transcript from CNN. So let's just play this. Here we go. Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a commercial. So let me just turn down the volume just in case. It says my video will play shortly, but it's not playing. So here we go. The screen has decided to, yes, it is a commercial. We'll keep the volume down for the time being. And when I see the images pop, so my video will play in 31 seconds. So this is interesting. It's like you used to get like 15 seconds of commercials before you watch a video. Now you're getting 45 seconds of a commercial, which is ridiculous to have to sit through. I like some of the, I guess YouTube lets you click through and leave a commercial after 5 seconds. All right, here we go. CNN. Let's hear this.
They are the biggest anti-government protests Turkey has seen in a decade. An explosion of anger, exacerbated by the Turkish police, who've been criticized for their excessive use of force.
İncil devlet especially, they're like monsters. They can't do that.
It's hard to believe it all started barely a week ago with this. A couple dozen protesters camped out in a central Istanbul park. They held a peaceful sit-in, protesting government plans to bulldoze one of the last green spaces left in the city center. Riot police cracked down, hitting protesters with tear gas and pepper spray. And then something in Turkey snapped. Demonstrators began attacking the police, outraged by the behavior of the security forces.
You can see here how the Turkish riot police are going after gatherings of people here in Istanbul's Taksim Square, in the heart of the city. Come on over here. Ordinary civilians being caught up in what's taking place here. An old lady knocked on the ground by the water cannon.
Suddenly, it wasn't about the park anymore. It was about the Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
He has big ego. He has this, Napoleon syndrome on it. He thinks himself as the next sultan and controlling all this Middle Eastern politics and such. He needs to stop doing that. He's just a prime minister. And he needs to remember that we people elected him.
Turkey's prime minister has responded with characteristic defiance, ridiculing the protesters and defending a decade in office during which his political party has won many elections.
Tayyip Erdogan is a dictator? If you are the kind of person who can call someone who serves their people a dictator, then I have no words for you.
You have a prime minister who has done great deeds, and he really does run the economy well, but he also has this paternalistic style. I know what's good for you, and I as your father can decide on the park, the bridge, the city, and the Constitution. So I think people are just wanting to have a more inclusive form of democracy in Turkey.
Saturday afternoon, riot police withdrew from Taksim Square, leaving behind burned-out vehicles and allowing the demonstrators to help clean up the mess. But the retreat from central Istanbul didn't stop the protests. Pre-dawn clashes erupted in other parts of Istanbul on Sunday and spread to the Turkish capital and the port cities of Izmir and Adana. In Istanbul's Taksim Square, demonstrators have been celebrating. Events have moved so quickly, no one here really knows what will happen next. Ivan Watson, CNN, Istanbul.
So this is actually a pretty amazing and tremendous event in its own right, no matter who's driving it, because truly this started as a protest in a park, and it has mushroomed and exploded into something I don't think the government there had any idea that was going to take place. So let me read just a little bit more here. I'm going to kind of skim through this. It says here, let's just start from the beginning. It says, more than a week after protests began sweeping Turkey, demonstrators kept up their occupation of bustling Taksim Square on Monday amid appeals from the government to abandon the rallies and return to work and school. What began as a small sit-in over the Turkish government's plan to demolish a park in central Istanbul in favor of a shopping arcade has morphed into the biggest protest movement since Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, I guess it's not Erdogan, since he was elected more than 10 years ago. On Monday, a confederation of unions claiming some 240,000 members added its voice to the anti-Erdogan chorus, saying it would go on strike against what it called the fascism of Erdogan's ruling party. Angry protesters who say police have responded to their demonstrations with excessive force and accused Erdogan of being paternalistic and authoritarian showed no sign of backing down, and the defiant Erdogan showed no inclination to give in to protesters' demands. So this is going to be very interesting to see what happens here. Says international human rights groups, Amnesty International and Greenpeace, who are totally flaccid, by the way, have denounced what they describe as excessive use of police force against peaceful protesters. On Monday, Erdogan dismissed such allegations. We are servants of the people, not masters. We did not use violence, he said, before leaving for a 4-day trip to North Africa, meaning he's getting the hell out of Dodge. He's going to be directing what's going on from a remote location, just in case things get a little too hot. He also downplayed claims that Turkey could be on the cusp of its own Arab Spring. The series of popular uprisings in North Africa and the Middle East have led to political upheaval in Tunisia and Egypt particularly, none of which have ended up well, by the way. Those in Turkey who speak of the Turkish Spring are right. The season is in fact spring, he said. But there are those trying to turn it into winter. Meanwhile, the Interior Ministry urged residents to not take to the streets Monday. We invite our citizens, especially our youth, to act with common sense and sensitivity and refrain from taking part in these illegal demonstrations being carried out by certain groups today, by certain groups. The day when the work begins, it said. So now they're claiming that there are other groups involved in this. This is what the Turkish government is saying. Apparently people are pissed off. That's the bottom line. People are totally pissed off about the whole deal. 1,889, there are 2,122 comments that follow this story. This is a CNN.com just recently put up within the last 2 hours, and there are 2,124 comments. This is big news, folks. Keep your eye on what's happening in Turkey, in as much as what it means for the Turkish people, but also what it means for what's happening in the greater theater of the Middle East as it relates to Syria. This definitely is a bit of a cog in the engine of what's taking place and gearing up there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit of music, and we're going to make a shift here in terms of programming and content. We're going to talk about something that just crossed my desk, so to speak, in the last hour, which is also quite troubling. This is what I want to play here. Let's play, how about, let's keep it close in terms of time. Let's play a little map reference. This is Wire and map reference. I'll be back in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and we're going to talk about Ben Fellows, who had spent a lot of time working with Stanley Kubrick and who is now gone mysteriously missing. So in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, we're going to get into Ben Fellows and see and uncover some pieces here about his own personal mystery. Map reference.
And I've seen the light to find geography, an aerial photographer, overexposed to the cartologist soothing images known, the areas where the water flows, so petrified the landscape grows. Explaining I try to understand the words in Syria, the carving and the bearing of the land, the quarters where the grass divides, beneath the ruler country high. Chorus. Interrupting my train of thought lines of longitude and latitude, if I refine my altitude. Interrupting my train of thought lines of longitude and latitude, if I refine my altitude. The curtains undrawn, harness predict no escape. Come on, full top flash, low lamps, let's take an up and I'll watch it go. Crystal palaces for floral kings, a well-known waving span of wings, witness the sinking of the sun, a deep breath of submission has begun. Interrupting my train of thought lines of longitude and latitude, if I refine my altitude. Interrupting my train of thought lines of longitude and latitude, if I refine my altitude. Interrupting my train of thought lines of longitude and latitude.
Sorry, I got lost in Windows there. That was wire map reference. Interrupting my train of thoughts. Darren Williams just posted something on Facebook not long ago. This is about Ben Fellows. And Ben Fellows was a child actor, and he began to speak out about child abuse as it related to the BBC. He also knew Stanley Kubrick, and for all intents and purposes was a whistleblower. And this is from a website called libertytactics.com. We have been in contact with whistleblower Ben Fellows' wife on the disappearance of her husband. Please read the following article and get this out to as many people as possible. We all want Ben to return to his family safely. At the recent UK Column conference, Ben was informed by Dave Eden, a former CID detective, that his wife was in immediate danger as a result of Ben's work. It was made clear that Ben should have an exit strategy. On Thursday, 23rd of May, after the attacks in Woolwich, approximately half a mile from the Fellows' residence, Ben and his wife returned home from visiting friends to find that their flat had been broken into. Nothing appeared to be stolen. At 11:30 p.m. that evening, the phone rang. An anonymous man told Ben to look outside his window to the other side of the street. A man in a black ski mask stood there on a mobile phone. Caller said, "What happened to that soldier today is what is going to happen to you." The soldier being the guy who got hacked up, theoretically, in Woolwich. At 11:30 p.m. that evening, the phone, we already said that. By the 28th of May, Ben and his wife decided to leave London to drive to a safe house. On arrival to the safe house, the couple were told the safe house had been compromised, so Ben decided to leave on his own for fear of harm coming to his wife. He arranged to stay with a friend at a location known to Ben and his wife. However, nothing has been heard from Ben since he left on the 28th of May. This morning, 3rd of June, Ben Fellow's wife received word from the friend whom Ben was to stay with, who alerted her that Ben never arrived. We're now attempting to contact various resources to see if anyone in the intelligence network has any details on Ben's location. So apparently a whistleblower has gone missing in the UK. And I don't live there, but Darren posted this. Darren Williams has been a guest on the show a number of times, posted this on Facebook, so I'm just reading it for Darren and the people that are looking for Ben. And it's unfortunate, but it's also symbolic and indicative of the times that we're living in. This is not business as usual, people. There is a massive, and I mean massive, unraveling of the corruption of any number of institutions, whether it's government or healthcare or the media, and there seems to be a level of collusion across all of them. And what's happening is that people are trying to bring attention to what's going on, what's taking place on a number of levels. And these people obviously are at risk as they do so, and Ben Fellows being one of them. And I don't think it's separate from what's happening in Turkey. In many ways, it's very connected, because here we have a group of people who are standing up against a regime who has acted with obviously a gross overreach in terms of how they would respond to a simple protest. And I think the Turkish government are getting far more than they bargained for. But this is endemic of the times that we're living in. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here come 2014 and the inception of Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act. I think that we are on the cusp of, and Webster Tarpley in one of his latest articles talks about this, we are on the cusp of more global protests than we've ever seen before. And this is a very critical time. Astrologically, of course, it gets played out in the Uranus, Aries, Pluto, Capricorn square, because what we saw, or what we're seeing in Taksim square being the operative word here, is Uranus and Aries being the spontaneous eruption of the individual's will, the human will, and it's squaring off against Pluto and Capricorn, which is this corporocratic plutonic force and entity, which is going to do whatever the hell it wants in spite of what people themselves want to experience or want to have a say in. So this square astrologically is getting played out in Turkey right now. And it's going to get played out over the course of the next 5 years as these squares continue to take place between Pluto and Uranus. We have another one coming up in November, which is going to be very intense. I've talked about this before in other shows. It's going to be very intense in November because there's a lot of other factors, the eclipse, Mercury retrograde, and Comet Ison/Scion all coming into play at that time. So this square that we're seeing now is clearly Uranus and Aries in action. And it's only going to spread. It's only going to get bigger. And I don't know where it's headed. I'm going to be really clear about that. I really don't know where it's headed. It could be a greater excuse to expand military power and fascism actually showing its hand as a result. But I don't think any country in the world is going to be immune over the course of the next year from these global protests and massive unrest. Right now, a lot of Central Europe is underwater. That's another interesting development. And water being, of course, emotion. And it's a continent in some ways that has become devoid of emotion. Alien Dave, my friend Dave here in Texas, sent me a link that of a show that Alfred Weber had just aired recently about how Europeans have become robotic. And I don't know the exact name of the show, but it was pretty interesting. And what's taking place now with the rise of the waters in Europe is obviously symbolic of a rise of emotion and denial that has been dammed up. So we're living in incredibly interesting times, and apparently we're still here. The global coastal event did not happen the way it was scripted on the 31st or the 1st, but we're here and we're seeing the rising tide of protest and dispute, and quite potentially in Turkey some form of revolution. Keep your eye on that. These are people, the Turkish people are very strong people, and they don't take a lot of crap. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. Now, when you have a dispute like that, which is a civil dispute, civil unrest, you essentially have people firing on cousins and brothers and sisters. It's akin to a civil war, and it can tear a country right in two. So it'll be fascinating to see how the police and the military respond to doing what they're doing upon their own people, quote unquote, and if they will continue to be able to do that. At some point, somewhere along the way, one of these countries where the police or the military are enforcing the rule of law, one of these countries, you're going to see a mass defection of people inside those forces. I can't really pin it on anything ontological or database. It's just a feeling, a gut feeling that I have, and you'll see it. You'll see these guys just put down their weapons and walk away, and it will be one of the most startling images that the world will experience and encounter. Trust me, it's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to happen, but it is going to happen. And it could be a very interesting turning point for the rest of the world, because really the only way that things can get carried out, the only way that the rule of law exists is by the people that enforce it. And if the people that enforce it decide that they don't want to enforce it, the rule of law no longer exists. I've talked about this on the show before. It's essentially just words on a page. It's only as good as the guns and bullets that are willing to back it up. So keep your eye on Turkey. And please, if you are in the UK and know anything about Ben Fellows, keep your eye on this as well and try to stay on top of it. He's not the first person that's suffered the fate of coming forward and speaking up about things which are not very popular and certainly not in the interest of the dark dominant paradigm. Just a little bit of a housekeeping here. On Friday, I'm going to have Rad Chick. She is from Oregon. She's from Portland, Oregon, and she is seriously a rad chick. She is on top of radiation in all of its manifestations and expressions and dangerous applications. She's all over what's happening in Fukushima. So we're going to talk with her. She's in Portland, Oregon. We're going to talk with her about Fukushima and the untold story around Fukushima, and also the dangers of radiation that are in our environment that you may not even be aware of. So we're going to get into that with Radchick. And then in the second hour, John Trudell is going to come back to the show. We're going to talk about what's happening with hemp, any updates in the hemp world. And we'll also get into John's music a little bit more. I'll be playing a track by John and Stephen Kent, my friend Stephen Kent, who plays didgeridoo. And John just did a jam with him last week with John reciting some of his spoken word material while Stephen played the didge. And I'm looking forward to that and playing that on the air. Talking with John, who is always in on-channel mode all the time. So I did a reading yesterday for somebody, and they said, you're different in Austin. You're different since you moved to California. And she said, in California you were more Uranian and more Californian. And and she's right. She's right to a large extent. I feel different here, and a lot of it has to do with the astrology of this place. People ask me, well, how is it, and what is it, and what's it like? And I try to tell them that now living here, I've got Pluto on my ascendant here, and it's really intense. It just feels like there are days when everything feels like it's about to completely collapse, and then for some strange reason, all of a sudden it reassembles and it's kind of better than it was before. And as a result of this, it's kind of tempering how I interact with my environment. It's I have a lot more respect for what the hell is going on here than in almost any other place, because I feel like I'm dealing with the powers and forces of the universe in ways that are, big, really big, larger than life, intense. Like, I have to respect them, or else I'll get completely blasted out of the water by them. So, maybe I'm a little less cavalier here than I was in California, but certainly there's reasons for it. And it's like, people have also said, well, you don't share as much about your personal life. Well, that's true. Maybe it's Pluto on my ascendant. But let's just say that my personal life is not a walk in the park. Many of you know about how I got here. I didn't really get here because I decided one day to move to Austin. There's a very complex family situation involved in my being here and getting here. And I consented to it because it was at the moment, I thought a really good thing to do. I felt like my time in California was over. The energy there it just been sapped. I mean, literally, I would sit in front of my computer for hours and just stare at my computer in the last months of being in California. I don't know why, but it was just like I couldn't summon. It was difficult for me to summon the energy to do what I needed to do, and yet I did it. I had to, because I'm doing this show and doing my best to build something and stay in touch with people as a result of doing all of this. So when I moved to Austin, there was more energy here for me to do stuff, but it's different energy, right? It's a different. So my time in California was over. Now, I don't really want to get into specifics about how this is all unfolding. Some of you know, because I'm friends with some of you out there and candid with some of you. But, based on how I got here in the kind of complex family situation, there is now I wouldn't call it a threat per se, but there is now this undercurrent that the complex family situation again is shifting, and there theoretically could be a return to California, which, by the way, I'm really not down with. So I'm now dealing with the fact that, there are rumblings that, due to the fact that my ex-wife, who's also here with me, again, it's complex. I moved here with her, with a kid, and it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, to be honest with you, is to be in relationship with somebody that you are not in relationship with, but yet share a child with. It is one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced, specifically when the two people who are involved in this clearly do not get along and have ideological differences on many levels. And now there is this quote-unquote new development which might quote-unquote force me to return to California, which I will not do. I'm not doing this. So this people want to know about my personal life sometimes, and me being candid, because I actually have been really candid throughout all of this, and I think being candid is part of what we do, or at least what I do. I've got, 4 planets in the 11th house. So, being candid is part of it. I am going to have Saturn transiting my 12th. So there's going to be some less candid moments, I think, as a result of that. But I'm just telling you, now I'm staring down this whole other dynamic and dilemma, which, quite frankly, I'm just not really, wanting to go through again. Anyway, so there you go. There's a slice of my personal life. I've opened up the vault on the. I just took a little door and I twisted the knob and I pulled it back and I opened up my 3rd chakra. There it is. Boom. Shining out to you, onto the world. It's complicated. It's a complicated situation. And I guess I signed up for this on some level, right? I guess, because I'm going through it. But I will keep you posted in the weeks and the months to come, because I know that as my listening audience, you probably have some investment in it to some degree or another. I sure as hell do. All right, it is 12:51 here in Central Texas, Austin, Texas. One of the voted right now by the BBC apparently as one of the best places to live in the world. I have no doubt about that. Things are happening here in Texas. There's a lot of money in Texas. I was just in Houston a couple of weeks ago, which was kind of weird. Houston's a weird place, but there is a ton of money in Houston. Houston has added more jobs than any other city in the United States in the past year. It's unfortunate those jobs are probably all based on fracking, but there you go. Austin, 2,000 people a week are moving here. Add that up, 2,000 people a week. That's 100,000 people theoretically coming to this area by the end of the year, from calendar day to calendar day. And Dave down here knows this because Dave has been involved in real estate, and he was the one that shared that figure with me. 2,000 people a week. That's significant. Google Wire's moving here. Businesses are moving here. There's no state tax here. People don't have to pay state taxes. It's very, very attractive to companies and individuals alike. And of course, Dallas is Dallas. It is the money center. Dallas is the Frankfurt of Texas. Dallas will always be growing and being bigger than any other city in the state. So things are happening here in a very big way. And I'm here, and I hope to be a part of it as the days and weeks, months progress. I hope to have somebody on the show on Wednesday who has just created a brand new tarot deck that is based on Lemurian mythology, symbolism, and magic. Her name is Sarah, and hopefully we can get her on the show on Wednesday and maybe do some tarot readings in addition to astrology. And then following this Friday, so it'll be 2 Fridays from now, I'm going to have my old friend Charles Osman on with me for part of the show. That's going to be on the 14th. And some of you might know Charles. He was on the show a long time ago. He's been on Coast to Coast at least 10 times. Art Bell would tap on Charles's shoulder quite frequently when there was some kind of technological development that Art wanted to cover. And I'm going to bring Charles on. And we're going to talk about the challenges of education in the wake of what I perceive to be a technological explosion and boom unlike any other that we're going to see here over the course of the next 10 years. If you think technology has really taken off in the last decade, and it has, I mean, we have seen some amazing things take place. We have the internet. Now we have these super powerful mobile phones that are like mini computers, in the palms of our hands, connecting us to everyone and everywhere, at any point in time. We have all kinds of developments around personal technology. You can make music, you can make videos, you can do crazy things with photos. There are massive tools that people can tap into and create their own media. This is unlike any other time we've ever experienced in history. Other medias are dying. The music industry is dying. Print media is dying. At some point in time, movies are going to die. Trust me, they're going to die. I had a vision the other day where people would just stop going to movies. It's going to happen at some point because there's going to be different delivery systems, different ways of seeing movies, experiencing movies. The theater as we know it, I'm guessing that 10 to 15 years from now, there'll be far less theaters than there are today. And then finally, well, cable TV is dying. So there's another medium. All these things are changing rapidly. And we also now have the 3D printer, which is a game changer unlike anything you've ever seen. But there's more. There's a lot more. There's miniaturization. There's automation. There's the rise of artificial intelligence. All that stuff is coming in a very big way. And our kids are not prepared to deal with the fourth wave, Toffler's fourth wave and beyond. They're getting they're getting a 20th century education. And they're going to be moving into a 21st century world that they may not necessarily be prepared to deal with from an educational and tactical standpoint. So we're going to talk with Charles about that and what can be done to help our children wrap their heads around or get prepared for the type of world we're going to be living in. And we'll also talk about the 3D printer and how that's going to impact manufacturing businesses, the supply chain, and what could potentially be the birth of home manufacturing. Think about that for a moment in time. Another Uranus and Aries highlight and application. Okay, that's it. We've reached the end of the show. Keep your eye on Turkey. It's certainly fluid and bears witnessing right now. You can go on Facebook, you can go on Twitter. There's plenty of alternative information that's emerging out of the situation. And the most important part of it is how it impacts the ongoing conflict in Syria, since Turkey is a very central point to all of this. Okay, so you know the drill. Use your head and discern what's real, your heart still what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to the Monday Mashup. Have a great week. I'll see you on Wednesday for Navigating the Astrological Matrix. Until then, here is our good friend,
90 seconds.
Philip K. Dick from the Beyond. Adios.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu. Perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this. Such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.